Hi, friends. Thank you for joining me on this session about config maps and secrets. Um, Today, I'm not going to show you my webcam because it died. My GoPro camera died yesterday, so I won't be able to show my camera, which is cool, I guess, so you don't have to see my face. Um, Anyways, today we're going to talk about config maps and secrets. However, let's do a quick recap about the last session. You might remember that we talked about health checks, which is a way to verify if our pods are behaving correctly, right? Health checks are used to determine if the state of a container or pod is behaving correctly, right? So there are three types of health checks: liveness, readiness, and startup. I talked about those differences. Liveness is for specifying or detecting if the pod or the container is ready to receive requests. Readiness is, I'm sorry, liveness is to determine if it's alive. Readiness is to determine if it's ready to receive traffic, and startup is for executing something that you need to run at the startup of your containers. So there are three probing mechanisms that we can use. The first one is a command execution. Maybe you want to execute a command or application to determine if your container is behaving correctly. Or maybe you can expose a HTTP endpoint so you can receive requests. So Kubernetes can know if this pod is behaving correctly. And there's also a TCP socket mechanism. And we showed you this couple of examples with the HTTP GET and the command execution as well. So that's nice. And today I'm going to talk about config maps and secrets, which is a way to configure our applications so you don't have your configurations and secrets hard coded in your code, right? So that's a way of decoupling your configuration and managing that configuration in a decoupled way. Before we do this, let me explain environment variables in Kubernetes. So you might remember when we create a pod, we have the manifest file that has the API version, kind, metadata, and spec. And inside the spec field, we have the containers element, and that's the place where we define the container configuration, right? Such as the image name and resource limits and some other things. And actually, this is the place where we configure the environment variables that your application or service might want to use. So for instance, in this example that I have here on the screen, you can see that I'm specifying a couple of environment variables named environment underscore variable underscore name, and the other one with 2, right? So as you can see, env, this is the element that we use for specifying the environment variables for our containers in a pod. Very easy stuff. However, what happens if you don't want to set your values directly in the manifest file? Because remember, most of the time, those manifest files will be stored in the source control repository, right? So it doesn't make sense to store a hard-coded value. For instance, let's say that this is a connection string or this is an API key or something. For security purposes, it doesn't make sense to store that value in the manifest file. So you need something like environment variables to dynamically inject those values into your containers, okay? Okay, that said, let's talk about config maps, which is the first topic for today. Config maps are shared configuration stores that we can read from the YAML files. So config maps, you can think about those like a special place where you can put configuration values. Those are key value pairs that you can specify, and your container can read those values dynamically and in a decoupled fashion, right? This is for non-confidential decoupled configuration items. And one of the traits of config maps is that their data is not encrypted. Okay, so you should be careful about that. Config maps are not meant to store super confidential and super secure and sensitive information, okay? Because the data is not encrypted. That's why. And config maps, they have this limit. Data can be larger than 1 megabyte, which is almost 1 megabyte. Actually, those data types are different. However, data can be larger than 1 megabyte, okay? So config maps are useful when we want to set environment variables in our containers precisely, okay? So you can, for example, use the name of the config map that you want to use, and Kubernetes is going to make sure that all the key values in a specific file or maybe in a directory, those values that you want to inject will be available in your container, okay? And one of the things that you should be careful about is that the config maps objects that you want to use for your container and pods must be in the same namespace. Okay, so you need to create your config map objects in the same namespace as your pods where you're going to use those configurations, okay? So if you want to do this, in other words, if you want to use a config map for specifying and setting your environment variables instead of a hard-coded value, you can use the value from field, as you can see here on the screen, okay? So I'm going to talk about that in a minute. There are different sources that we can use for config maps. The first one is literal values. In other words, you can specify by using the kubectl command the environment variable and literal values that you want to use for that config map, okay? The other ones are a file with environment variables. This is an env file that has key value pairs. And also you can use a file with arbitrary text. Of course, those are quite similar. Just a text file with key value pairs, right? Or you can use a directory that has one or many files that you want to dynamically read to inject those values into your containers. So why do we want to do this? Well, it depends on your needs. However, most of the time you're going to use, I say, a file, an environment variables file that you might have to implement yourself, and or maybe you want to use from literal option. Okay. So the first command that I have here on the screen is creating a config map object named logger that is using the from literal flag, and it's using the equal sign and then specifying the key and value for this literal, okay? So you know what, let me open up the terminal because I'm not sure if I ran Minikube beforehand. Let's do this, Minikube delete, and I'm going to stop the previous cluster that I had before. And after I do this, I'm going to deploy a new cluster, say Minikube, start and the driver that I want to use is Hyper-V. Okay, I'm going to deploy this cluster with one node only. Okay, so the second option is, as you can see here, is reading the myconfig.env file that has environment variables. The other one from file is reading that myfile.txt file. And finally, the other one, the last one, is just reading a directory named my directory, and it's going to read all the files. It might have one file, or maybe it has 10 files. It doesn't matter. It's going to read all the files in that particular directory. And of course, that's for imperative creation of the config map objects. And you can also use a manifest file. Here's an example of a manifest file written in YAML. And as you can see, it's using the API version kind. The kind is config map. Metadata, this is the place where we use the name field for specifying the name, the technical name that we're going to use for referring to this config map object, which in this case is my app-config map. And finally, instead of spec, we have data, this field, when I can specify all the different key value pairs, such as environment equals development, file name equals file.txt, name equals Kubernetes, show equals Kubernetes Fundamentals, and whatnot. Okay. And also you can use get for obtaining and listing all the config maps objects that you have on your cluster. So the first command that I have here on the screen is returning all the config maps objects. And the last one is getting a specific config map object, which is logger, and it's returning its values and the entire object as YAML. Okay. So let's see if the cluster is already deployed. Yes. kubectl say get nodes. This is behaving correctly. I just need one node. I don't need anything else for today's session. So let me go here to session 8 because I want to create a couple of files for creating the config map. Say that I want to create a config map by using the imperative way. So I can use kubectl create config map and the name, right? Demo. And I can use from literal, or I can use from file and those things. So let's say I want to use from literal, and I want to specify, I don't know, name equals CSharpCorner. Okay. So as you can see, I created this config map object, and I can list all the different config maps by using kubectl get config map or config maps or CM. Remember that we have those aliases when using kubectl. So as you can see, I have demo, which is the config map object that I just created. And Minikube, when it deployed the cluster, it created this kube root-ca crt config map for its own purposes. So let's say that I want to get the specific config map. So get cm / demo, and I can output this as YAML. So you can see that this is actually the manifest for this particular object. That's why I'm showing you the API version, metadata, kind, and data. Of course, those the position of those fields is different. However, it doesn't matter in this case. Okay, we can see that in data I have name, which is the this key that I created, right? And the value is CSharpCorner. Okay. So let's go back here. Let's see what we can do. So Let's create a new environment variables file named myconfig. Actually, in order to expedite this process, I already created one. So you need to see me typing all the time. So I created this mysecrets.env, right? Let's clear up the screen. So name, series, session 8, right? Only in CSharpCorner live. Okay, so I have those 4 key value pairs, and I want to read this entire file when creating the config map. Okay, so let's create another config map. Create config map. Let's say demo with file, or just file, demo-file, and I'm going to use this other command that I showed you, which is from env file. So env file, and the name of the file is my secret. Is that it? I can remember. Maybe it's my secret env. No, my secrets. Yes, my secrets. It's right there. My secrets.env. So this config map object was created, and of course, if I execute again, get all the different config map objects, I can get the demo and also the demo file config map that I created, right? And it has 4 key value pairs, and I can do this, get config maps, demo file, and output YAML, so I can see that name only in series and session were successfully uploaded to the config map object. Okay, so very easy stuff for creating those value and key value pairs that I need in my applications, right? So let's say that you have a pod where you want to use those config map key value pairs. So what would you do? So in this case, as you can see, in this fragment of this pod manifest file, I'm using env from, right? It's using env from instead of env, and it's using this element named config map ref for referencing the entire config map object by name. So as you can see, we can do this env from using the config map ref and then specifying the name of the config map object that you want to use. Okay. So actually, let's do this. Okay. Let's do this. Let's go back to the terminal and let's create a pod. Okay. Actually, to expedite this process, I think I created a pod. Yes. So I created this my pod.yaml file, and the name, it doesn't matter. Actually, the container image name, it doesn't matter as well. You can see that I'm using env from, and I'm using config map ref. And finally, I'm using demo. Let's use demo-file. So that's the config map that has 4 different key value pairs, right? So if I execute kubectl apply and I pass this my pod.yaml file as a parameter, this is going to inject all those different key value pairs as environment variables in this particular container. Okay, so let's see if this works. So kubectl apply my pod.yaml. So the pod was created. Let's verify if I have the pod created. It's creating the container in this particular moment. Okay, so let's wait for a little bit. So the container is created. Okay, it's running now. And now we can verify if we have those environment variables in place. There are many ways that we can use for verifying this. I can create a new web API application by using .NET and ASP.NET Core and using the environment class for reading all the environment variables and blah, 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 blah. Or I just can execute the env command in the shell. So let's do that. kubectl, okay? Exec, remember that we have this command for executing commands in a particular pod. So the pod is my app, and the command that I want to execute is env. So as you can see, I have only in CSharpCorner Live, series, session, and name, right? Those were injected dynamically when I created the pod, because I'm referencing that particular config map, okay? So that's one way. Of course, I can use other techniques, such as making an interactive session here. And this is the shell of that particular container. As you can see, this is Linux. And I can execute env and return all the different environment variables that I have here in this container. Cool. So this is working. This is one way that we can use for running this, right? Let's go back to the presentation and let's continue talking about this. So the thing about the technique that I used is that it's not changing the key names. And what happens if you have this particular, I don't know, maybe a particular rule for naming things? In other words, what happens if I had, say, I don't know, only in, right? Only in lowercase instead of uppercase. And maybe you want all your different environment variables to be in uppercase, right? Or maybe you want to separate words with an underscore. Or maybe you want to have, say, a prefix or something, right? So with this technique that I used, I mean, injecting the entire file, that's not possible with that, okay? So you need to do something else, such as reading by key. In this way, as you can see, I'm specifying each environment variable, right? For example, ASP.NET Core underscore environment, file name, only underscore in or whatnot. The most important thing here is that I'm not using env from anymore. I'm just using env, okay? So you use value from instead of value when specifying your environment variables, and you use the config map key ref, okay? You reference the key inside the config map instead of the entire config map object. Make sense? So you're referencing a key instead of the entire object. In this case, I'm reading the environment fictitious key that I have in this fictitious config map. Of course, if we use this for our own purposes, I can use this for renaming things, right? So actually, let's do this. Let's copy this, and let's go back to Visual Studio Code. And let's get rid of env from, okay? Let's use env. Let's try again, right? So only in, right? And the name of the config map that I want to use is demo file. And the key is only in. I'm changing the names. I'm changing the keys, right? So you have full control. At the end of the day, this is the technique that you want to use for having full control over the names of your environment variables. So just to expedite this process, let's do this. So I guess that's the only change that I need to specify. Let's try kubectl apply f my pod.yaml. So I have something wrong with this structure. Try again. Oh, YAML. Name, EMB name, it's under EMB, value from it's under. This is the thing about YAML, right? So, okay, name and value from should be on the same alignment. EMB should be, okay, let's try again. So I guess this is wrong. This should be the place. Identical fields. Something is going on only in config map. Name value from. Am I making something wrong? Okay. Yes, the thing is that I cannot change other things other than the containers and the image and some other things. It looks like it's not allowing me to change the environment variables. So let's see if I can delete the pod, my app, right? And let's try again. Yes, that was the error. And okay, let's go back to the terminal because I don't have enough space here. So I have the pod again, get pods, okay, kubectl exec my app EMB, and as you can see, I renamed that particular key because I had full control over the naming of keys, right? And of course, I just read one particular environment variable. However, you can use this technique for specifying the rest of the environment variables. In this case, I was only using only in, right? Anyways, and remember that you cannot change environment variables while your pod is running. I had that error, and I fixed that by just deleting the pod, right? Okay, cool. So you can verify if all your environment variables are in place by executing EMB. Of course, this is if a technique if you're using Linux, right? And or you can just use an interactive session in your container and execute and explore the environment with other commands, right? So cool. Let's talk about secrets. So secrets are similar to config maps. Actually, the commands and the explanation is almost the same. However, secrets are meant to be used for storing sensitive data, such as passwords, connection strings, tokens, API keys, and whatnot, okay? And again, this is for decoupling your configuration and for decoupling your values and, of course, those sensitive data values that you want to use in your applications, right? So one thing that you should know about secrets is that values are just encoded in base 64 format. Those secrets are not encrypted, okay? So secrets are not super secure out of the box, okay? If you want to make them super secure, maybe you want to use something like Azure Key Vault or HashiCorp Vault or something else for encrypting your data at rest, okay? because those values out of the box are just encoded in base 64 format. So we use secrets very similar to config maps. We can use them for setting environment variables, just like I did beforehand when I used the config map. However, in this case, you can use the secret key ref if you want to say you want to reference a particular key in your secret object. You can use secret key ref. So this is very similar to the previous technique that I used. So there are three secrets options that you want to use when creating those objects. The first one, and I think that's the most common one, is generic. This is for creating secrets that are meant to be used with local files, directories, and literal values, very similar to the config map, okay? So let's say that you want to specify your own literal values, then you should use generic. Or maybe you want to use the same technique that I used. I say with that environment variable file, right? Like my secrets.env that I used, then you should use generic. The other two, Docker registry and TLS, are for creating a secret that is going to be used with a Docker registry. And the latter is for creating a TLS secret. So in this case, I'm going to use generic, okay? So if you use generic, then you can use the same sources that I explained before with config maps. Again, literal values, a file with environment variables, or a file with arbitrary text, or a directory that has one or many files. So you can create secrets, of course, with the imperative way by using kubectl, or you can use a manifest file, right? In this case, I'm showing you here on the screen the way of creating a secret by using the kubectl command. And the first one, the first line that I have here is using the from literal flag, and it's specifying API key 12345 as the value of that particular key. Very easy stuff. Just take into account this generic option. This is the place where you use generic or TLS or Docker registry, okay? kubectl create secret, the type of secret, and then the name of the secret, and finally, all the different flags that you want to use. So the second option here is reading the mysecrets.env file by using the from env file flag. And the last one is reading a file that has, say, a connection string or something, right? That's just an arbitrary text file that has this content, right? So if you want to use the YAML way, in other words, the declarative way, then you should create a manifest file. And here on the screen, we have this manifest file for a secret. Take into account that the kind is secret. So we have API version, kind, metadata, and we have other things such as type and data. Type is for specifying the contents here in the manifest file by using a base 64 string. Take into account that you have to encode it yourself. This is not going to be encoded by Kubernetes, okay? So you should use something like an online encoder, or maybe you have a command or tool in your own operating system that does that. However, you need to do that, okay? You need to encode it yourself. So let's say base 64 encoder. So this is the one that I use, which is base 64 decode.org. And then you can decode your text here And actually, I think there's another one for encoding your data, okay? This is just for decoding. Oh, yeah, the option is right there. Encode, right? So this is funny that they have two different domain names for encoding and decoding. Anyways, that's that. And you can encode your string values here. Anyways, you have to encode it yourself. That's the message that I want to give you, okay? So you can use get secrets for obtaining all the secrets, or if you want to obtain a single secret, you can use get secret and the name of the secret, and then you can output that particular secret in other formats such as YAML, right? And you can use describe as well for describing a particular secret. So let's do this. Let's create a secret, okay? And I'm going to use this option because I want to reuse the mysecrets.env file that I already have. So kubectl create secret, right? And the type is generic my secret, okay? That's the name. And from env file, and the name of the file is mysecrets.env. Of course, I'm executing this command in this folder because this is the place where I have this file, right? So let's execute this. I don't know what happened. Again, oh, what's going on here? Looks like, I don't know if that was executed. Kubectl get secrets. No. Okay, again. Okay, that was created successfully. Again, get secrets. I have my secret with base64 data. So let's see what's going on here, okay? Let's see if, say, kubectl get secrets, my secret, okay? That's the secret. Output YAML. So in this case, I have those values. I guess this is because I use the file option, okay? And I use the kubectl command. If you want to use the manifest file way, in other words, the declarative way, you should encode it yourself. However, if you use the kubectl command, then those values will be encoded by Kubernetes, okay? Just to be perfectly clear about that. So because I mentioned before that you have to encode it yourself, yes, that's true for the declarative way. However, I'm using the imperative way, right? By using kubectl create. Anyways, I have name only in series and session. And as you can see, those values are encoded in base64. So we can actually verify this. Say, I want to copy this, okay? Let's go back here to the decode option, and let's click on decode, and I have this value, the original value, which is CSharpCorner live, which is great. So I don't need to show you the name and series and session as well, because those are base64. I'm sure about that, okay? Again, remember, if you want to use the manifest file, then you should encode those values yourself. Anyways, this is great. I created my first secret, and I'm listing all the secrets. And actually, this is my last slide. And you know what? Let's change the pod. Let's change this because I want to use the technique that I showed you in this slide. So instead of using config map keyref, I'm going to use secret keyref, okay? So value from, okay, secret keyref, and the name of the secret is my secret, right? And the key is only in. Okay. So I'm going to create this pod, and it's going to read the values from the secrets instead of the config maps. Okay. Just to be sure that we understand what we're doing here. So before I do this, let's delete the pod, because remember that you can change the environment variables while the pod is running. So let's create the pod by executing apply kubectl apply my pod.yaml. So the pod is created. Let's verify this. Kubectl get pods. It's running. Kubectl exec my app env. And let's see if we have the only in environment variable. And we have it only underscore in, and the value is CSharpCorner, right? Make sense? The thing here is that I'm using the secret instead of the config map. Of course, I'm just using the CSharpCorner light string. It's not super sensitive data, but of course, you can easily see that you can use this with connection strings or key value pairs or whatnot. Okay, I'm sorry, with API keys or connection strings and sensitive data. Okay. So cool. So I think I have enough time to do that demo that I want to create by using .NET. Let's create a new web API named demo session 8. Okay, so I'm using .NET for creating this web API. I'm using .NET 7. Okay. So here in this place, I have a lot of things, and those are from the template that I'm using. So let's create a new endpoint here, say get environment variable or something, right? So I want to use environment dot get environment variable, and the name is only in. So I'm going to return this. Okay. And let's use the HTTP get attribute. So this is going to be EMB or something. Actually, doesn't matter. So I'm returning. Each time I execute a get to this endpoint, this is going to return the value of only in. Okay. Make sense? So of course there are a lot of there's a lot of noise here. Actually, you know what? Let me just get rid of everything. I'm not going to use anything from the weather forecast thing. So cool. .NET build. So this is compiling. .NET run. Okay. So this is running. So I can go ahead and open up a new terminal, and let's go back here. What was the name of the? Okay, this is the endpoint. I mean the URL of this web API. So let's say curl blah 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 EMB. Of course, I'm not going to return anything because there are there's no only in this particular in my machine, right? So something's going on. So it's weather forecast EMB. Let me try again. Weather forecast EMB. Okay, yeah, it's not returning an error. The first one was because my endpoint was incorrect. Anyways, I'm touching this particular line, and the thing is that I don't have any environment variable named only in. Okay, so this is the scenario here. Okay, cool. Let me close Visual Studio because I don't have enough space in this resolution. And let's do the following. You know what? I need to create a Docker file What I want to do is, okay, I have this small web API that is going to read the environment variable. So I need to create a Docker image file. I mean, not a file, but the container image, right? And then I have to upload it somewhere. And that somewhere, most of the time, is Docker Hub. So Kubernetes can pull that container image when creating a pod. So this is what I'm going to do here. So .NET new solution. Let me create a new solution here. And if you're not a .NET developer, just be sure that I'm just reading the environment variable, okay? That's it. And I created this ESLN file. This is the solution that is for grouping projects in .NET. So .NET solution add. Okay, cool. Again, let me open up the solution in Visual Studio. And why Visual Studio? Because I have this beautiful command, this option here, add Docker support for Linux, and this is going to create the Docker file. Okay, that's why I created. I opened the project inside Visual Studio for creating this Docker file. That's it. So, okay, I created the Docker file. So, as you should know, Docker files are used for creating container images. So I'm ready to create this image container Docker. What was that command? Docker build. Is that it? Let's see if this is enough. So what it's doing right now is downloading a bunch of base images because I'm using .NET 7, okay? So after that, it's going to start creating the entire container image. So it looks like it's working. Okay, cool. So at the end of the day, I will have the demo session 8 container image name, okay? So Docker image list, or what was the Docker image? Yes, that's the command, right? So this is the one. I didn't specify any kind of tag. So let's tag this Docker tag, blah, 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 and the name of my Docker Hub account, and then demo session 8. Okay. So I guess I'm ready to push, Docker push, the name of my username, demo session 8. So it's pushing this container image to Docker Hub. Okay. So let's wait and see if this is gonna work. Again, let me show you the code for this. In the controller, I'm just using environment.get environment variable and a name of an environment variable, okay? So the thing about this web API is that I want to return the value of that particular environment variable. Make sense? If you're not a .NET developer, actually it doesn't matter. It's super easy, right? The only thing that is that this is doing, this is executing, is this this line of code. Okay. The rest of the things here, they doesn't matter. They don't matter. Okay. Okay. Let's go back to the terminal and wait for this container image to be pushed. I'm sorry about that. Anyways, let's wait and see. And let's open up Docker Hub. I don't know if this is going to work. I'm pretty sure it will work. Okay, hubdocker.com, my username. I don't need to register. I don't need to log in, right? So, okay, let's wait and see. Let's go back here to the terminal. And just let's wait and for this to be pushed, okay? In the meantime, I'm going to modify my pod.yaml because I need to change this to that particular container image, right? That I'm just pushing. So the name will be my app. The image name is another different one. And so I'm creating this environment variable. This is important, right? This is important. So I just created the secrets. The secrets are in place. I don't need to do anything else, right? Because the secrets are part of the cluster. Those are decoupled from the pods. So I think I don't need to do anything else. I'm just creating this only in, and I'm reading the secret, which the key is only in. Okay, makes sense? So it's just a matter of waiting for this. So let's wait for a little bit. It's kind of slow today. Anyways, this is gonna be fun. I promise you. I'm going to execute curl, and it's going to return only in CSharpCorner live. So great. That container image name was pushed. Let's go back here. Yes. So I have it here in my Docker Hub. And because of the fact Docker Hub is the default container registry for Kubernetes, if I apply this pod manifest file, I'm telling Kubernetes, hey, you know what? I want to use this container image name. So this should work. kubectl get pods. Let's delete this pod. Delete pod, my app. Okay, cool. Get pods. And again, kubectl apply my pod and create it. So this is being created right now because it needs to pull the container image from Docker Hub, right? And of course, I already had the container image in my machine, right? So that's why it happened super fast. So it's running. So let's go back to the terminal. Let's see what happened. Describe pod, my app. So as you can see, pulling image, blah, 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 successfully pulled image, blah, blah, blah. Okay, cool. So, okay, now kubectl exec my app, and I want to execute env. And as you can see, this is returning CSharpCorner live. So that's great. And I need to expose somehow this pod. I need to expose this somehow. I need to create a service. I don't think I will have the time to do that. So anyways, I'm going to show you this in the beginning of the next session because I need to create a service to expose this pod and then execute curl with the endpoint, which is weather forecast /env to return this. However, believe me, this is going to work. I just need to expose this. However, I don't have enough time in this session. That's going to, I'm going to show you that in the following session, okay? Anyways, I showed you this entire flow, this workflow, right? For creating the container image. Actually, I created this super fast web API project, and then I containerized this project. I pushed the container image to a Docker registry, and then I created the pod that pulls that container image. And anyways, the environment variable is there, right? So the .NET command environment.get environment variable, I assure you that it's going to work and it's going to return that. However, I don't have enough time to do that in this particular session. So that's what I had for today. And in the following session, we're going to do a learning checkpoint, okay? So learning checkpoint, okay? Checkpoint is not a feature about Kubernetes. It's not an object. I just want to review the entire 8 sessions that we had already, okay? So this is going to be like a summary of all the things related to the first 8 sessions that we had in this Kubernetes Fundamentals series, only in CSharpCorner, okay? Of course, before we start the learning checkpoint, I'm going to be sure to show you the service and executing curl to return the environment variable value, okay? Anyways, this was great. This was fun. Config maps and secrets. Those are for specifying configuration values in a decoupled fashion for our Kubernetes applications and services. Thank you very much for your time, friends, and see you next week.